Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money. We're Ben and Malcolm be keeping it funny. Turn on the show, get ready to go, and no, you can't take nothing from me. Scoop, scoop. Woo, 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 woo. Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money and amazing imitations of Migos, if I might say so myself. Malcolm, how did you like that, sir?
Amazing is subjective.
Okay.
But accurate.
Accurate?
I'll use accurate.
Okay, there
Because the
you
Migos
go.
aren't that amazing, in my opinion.
Really?
I hope we don't lose any fans and followers for me saying that. But Migos aren't all that amazing anyway.
I like Migos because I feel like they actually changed and created a new style of rap.
Right, but I wish they hadn't changed it. That's the problem. So you're right, because there's so many people that have come out since them that are obviously trying to imitate them.
Yes.
But I wish they never came out in the first place. And, folks like Drake were kind of like where the standard stayed. But,
I like Migos.
I'm just the old man yelling, "Get off my lawn!" at this point.
Clearly. And I was gonna say, speaking of music and rap music, Snoop Dogg recently released a gospel album.
Hadn't heard. I'm not even trying to be funny.
You didn't know that?
I had absolutely no idea.
I skimmed through it. It's everything you would think it would be.
But that kind of it proves your point a long time ago where you said, like, you don't want to hear grandfathers rapping. So he had to move on and find something that was more in his lane now that he is a grandfather with gray dreads.
Right.
Like, he's got to move on to something. So, hats off to him for not trying to sound like the Migos.
That's true. And then also the last detail in music recently, Wendy's, the restaurant, the fast food restaurant, put out a mixtape.
I heard.
You heard?
That I did hear.
Did you pull it up?
I heard about Wendy's mixtape before I heard Snoop had an album out.
A gospel album.
That's saying something.
Yeah, that is saying something.
I didn't listen to it. I heard like a quick snippet of it on the radio that they played, like 10 seconds maybe. But it wasn't anything significant.
It wasn't good, but as a marketing thing, it was amazing.
Wendy's is trying to get younger and younger and younger.
Okay.
Because I don't know how much you pay attention. I know you don't jump on Twitter as often as I do.
You are.
But they
you do.
had this Twitter war going on with McDonald's for like weeks.
That's hilarious.
So their Twitter account and McDonald's Twitter account, whoever actually runs it, whoever's their social media person, were taking shots at each other on a daily basis, back and forth for a few weeks until all of a sudden it disappeared. But so they're trying to stay young and relevant.
I think that was part of a marketing campaign, but
Sure.
that's because I'm cynical like that. We want to remind people you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. This episode's conversation at hand: higher education alternatives, other things you can do aside from going to college and still make a decent living and wage. But before we go into that, as we do on every show, it is now time for headlines. The headline for this show, Malcolm: Mark Zuckerberg has regrets. I'm really sorry that this happened. This was from a CNN March 2018 story by Danielle Weiner Bronner. You may have heard the dorky kid who created one of the most well-traveled and culturally impactful websites in the world is acknowledging a huge misstep in sharing and misuse of Facebook user data. News broke recently that Cambridge Analytica, a data firm with ties to President Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, accessed information from 50 million Facebook users without their knowledge and might have kept the data even after Facebook asked that they delete it. The revelation put Facebook and Zuckerberg under the microscope for their handling of user data and privacy. Zuckerberg addressed the scandal publicly through a Facebook post on Wednesday, of course. He wrote that the company made mistakes and outlined how it has changed its policies to make sure that user data is protected. He was quoted in I think it was a video interview where he said, "I wish we had taken those steps earlier. That is probably the biggest mistake that we made here." So that was a quote from Zuckerberg himself. In 2014, Facebook changed its platform to limit the amount of data that third-party developers could access. Alexander Kogan, the data scientist who passed along data to a group an affiliate of Cambridge Analytica, built a Facebook app that drew data from users and their friends in 2013. He was allowed to access to a broad range of data at the time. So essentially what it means is like there was an app that was built and the app reached into the data reservoir of Facebook and then like scraped data together. Though Kogan's data was properly obtained through that app, he breached Facebook's policy when he shared the information with a third party, Facebook said. When Facebook learned about the information being shared, it asked Cambridge Analytica to destroy the data Cambridge said it had. There's more to the story, but the data was reportedly used to support information distribution efforts, which is alleged to have influenced the 2016 election. Malcolm, this is a story that's been in the news for a lot, and it's been in the news because there's like a political impact of like how this information was used, how people were targeted in terms of the information that was shared, and people like kind of doing the amplifier effect for different kinds of news stories. But when it comes to data and companies, what are the implications for money and personal finances for people that use things like Facebook and have their data in these different places that they might not be aware of?
I could kill a whole show on that alone. But I think so. We've touched on it before on previous shows. Touched on the fact that specifically as it pertains to this story, the fact that these folks know your hopes and dreams and wishes and wants and everything, your vices and everything else, better than even your best friend or your parent. They're able to sell you things that you haven't even figured out or decided that you want. So it impacts you financially because it taps into that impulse that forces you to spend money that you wouldn't have otherwise spent. So politics aside, because we're just talking finances in this lane, it creates this desire inside of you to spend money on something, and then on the next screen shows you that thing that you all of a sudden desired to buy. And then separate from the data gathering and pushing it to you, you also now are in this like loop, this time loop where you're scrolling through your feed of pictures of all of your friends. Possessions, because you know what happens when somebody buys a new car or a new house or a new dog or a new kid or whatever.
You gotta post it.
And so now you're scrolling through it saying, man, the only way I'm going to match up to what Ben's doing over there is if I buy myself a new car, or is if I buy, that kind of thing. And so it's kind of twofold. Like there's the social aspect of it from you feeling like you're missing out and you trying to catch up with your friends, keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. But then there's also the psychological aspect of it, of you being shown the things that you have told the app that you desire, and them now pushing them to you and saying, here's the place for you to go buy it.
Absolutely. And I actually can think of a time very recently within the last couple of days where I felt like, oh, this is exactly why this is happening. As I've mentioned before on this show, I have a thing for tennis shoes somehow suddenly at the age of 28 through 30 for some reason.
Quarter life crisis.
Something like that. And I was in the market for a time for some new tennis shoes, right? And I bought them, but when I bought them, I think I did buy them online, right? And so they came, I wore them, and I might have been searching for some other shoes. And then I was scrolling Instagram, and an ad came through that showed me some shoes, and it continues to show me ads for shoes that I like. That I was like, oh, those are fresh. Those are fly. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is them tracking my searching behavior from a browser that I use on a regular basis, so maybe my work computer or my home computer or something, or on my phone, and it somehow finding its way to the Instagram, and then the Instagram, because you have to put the in front of it if you're old, and serving me an ad that is really highly likely and tailored to resonate with me.
The really amazing thing, though, is you don't even have to click anything for them to determine whether or not it was effective. It is now to the point where they can sell the amount of time that you spent looking at that thing to advertisers. And they say, well, he spent 8 seconds looking at this pair of shoes that were orange and blue, and he only spent 2 seconds looking at this pair that were black and green. So we have an idea that this particular guy likes blue and orange combinations of things together versus red and green, so show him more orange and blue. Even that specific, they can dig into it. So it's really like frightening, but at the same time, like, we do it to ourselves, because Facebook, to us, the user, is free, right? Facebook and every other social media platform is free for us to use. But essentially what's happening is we're thinking that we're using this product for free, not realizing that we are the product that's being sold to somebody else. So it's just, you know, I love to get on my soapbox and rail against social media and how data gathering is going to be the end of the world, because, you know, at this point, data is more valuable than oil even coming out of the ground.
Wow.
But in this case, I'm glad that this whistleblower did actually come make it known exactly what was going on.
Is it, to your point about data becoming more valuable than oil, which has typically been an incredibly valuable commodity in the past, is data getting so specific and in some ways so vulnerable that companies can like take advantage of its consumers in a way that's going beyond advertising and going into another realm of maybe like taking advantage, or, you know, taking advantage of people's weaknesses? I might have a shoe weakness. Like, are we approaching that point where
gambling? So that's where that whole AI, artificial intelligence component, has now tipped the scales to make this data aggregation business way more scary than anybody ever like probably planned for. Like the fact that now it doesn't take a devious human being at Facebook or at whatever advertising firm that's buying ad space on Facebook to cook up a scheme and say, you know what, I'm going to get Ben's additional dollars by doing X. Now we've gotten to the point where we've built algorithms to teach the other algorithm how to determine what somebody actually likes and is more likely to do or buy or spend money on, without human influence even having to touch it. Like, there are algorithms out there right now that are creating fake user profiles on Twitter and Instagram to go, you know, spread fake propaganda and to create fake ads to sell you products that really don't exist, to get you to click the link to then give you a virus on your device. And I mean, there's like so many things that now computers are teaching computers to do. It's gotten way beyond what people initially decided, you know, this is the thing that's going to revolutionize the world. It's gotten so far beyond us now.
I'm thinking about the movie I, Robot for some reason. So anyway, well, this is a reminder you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money. Today's conversation at hand, higher education alternatives. We're going to take a quick music break, but when we return, we're going to talk about that subject. But first, I want to remind folks that you can catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. And please leave us a review on any of those platforms. That helps us go up in the ratings. Also, if you have a question for Malcolm that you'd like him to answer on the show, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can also catch us on 2 of the 3 Facebook-held company social media platforms. Instagram, what's your handle, Malcolm?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, mine is at MYDM1. And of course, the irony is not lost on me. You can also find us on Facebook.com/ManageYourDamnMoney. I feel so dirty. We are going to take a quick music break. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Today's conversation at hand, higher education alternatives. Springtime is near that time, and it means that high school seniors everywhere are weighing where they're headed at the close of their high school career. Straight to work, an apprentice program, 2-year or 4-year college. We all know the financial burden collegiate experiences have for millennials, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, and everybody that comes after millennials, and now are considering alternatives to traditional 4-year universities. That's why on this episode of MYDM, we're looking at other ways to find careers that work that might also save you several thousands of dollars down the line. So this is an interesting question, Malcolm. As millennials and the younger generations come into the space, there's been like kind of a reevaluation of what it means to spend money on going to college.
Right.
And so we thought we'd spend some time on looking through some of the alternatives for that. So we pulled a story with the headline, 5 Proud Alternatives to Going to College. This was a piece by Robert Farrington wrote. It was in 2014 for Forbes, and explored honorable alternatives to college. He wrote, college isn't for everyone. Plain and simple, there are a myriad of reasons for not going to college, but American culture still pushes every high school graduate down that path. While there's a stigma attached to not having a college degree, there are solid alternatives to not going to college as well. And even though statistics show huge earning gaps between high school and college graduates, these alternatives show that doesn't have to be the case. So the first one on here, Malcolm, is tradesmen and or going to vocational school. It says some electricians find themselves earning well over $70,000 by taking advantage of overtime and other opportunities, and that's, of course, if you've been in the industry for a little bit. Another one that's really well known and popular, enlisting in the military. When it comes to job security, promotional opportunities, and even education, the military is second to none. Then also it suggested getting an entry-level job. An entry-level job at a larger company or in retail can be a path to a career with stability over time. And then also entrepreneurship, which is an option to a certain extent if you have certain things that you understand. But depending upon the kind of business it is, sometimes you need some more experience before you can just hop straight into being an entrepreneur as an 18-year-old. You can also try your hand at the gig economy, which is, of course, when you go online and you do like piecemeal jobs here and there over time and try to cobble together a living that way.
So that's not like driving Uber?
I guess, I mean, that would categorize as that, and then maybe you do something else in addition to that that helps to create a living for yourself. And there's a lot of different options, TaskRabbit, Fiverr, websites where you can go on.
I'm going to college.
So those are things you can do. This is kind of some of these things, one of the things I added, which was the gig economy, right? But for the most part, everything else is kind of a old-ish list. What's available now, we're going to talk a little bit later on the show about what's available now that's a little bit more technologically advanced.
Right.
But have student loans in the Great Recession turned us in? Oh, shoot, that's something else. I don't know what these questions are.
Wait.
These are old questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to make up a question on the spot, Malcolm. What are some things the discussions that you remember from high school in terms of the considerations of going to college?
You know what's really interesting? You probably, well, I shouldn't say that. You may not readily assume this based on like who I am now.
Right.
But I'm a person who is vehemently telling people I'm not going to college.
Really?
Like when I was in high school, I was like extremely against going to college.
I just learned something new about
and
you,
that's
sir.
with me being the grandson of, educators, right? Like,
Right.
So for me, it was like, I already know what I want to do. That's go make money. I already had a successful lawn care business in high school that was doing pretty well, and I thought this was the most money anybody is ever going to make in their lifetime.
Right.
Why do I need to go to college? You go to college to learn how to make money. I already figured it out. So
I'm gonna cut
didn't
these
occur to
lawns.
me all these things like it's a seasonal business.
Right.
You got to pay the IRS.
Right.
You got to worry about employee turnover. All those things that didn't exist at the time because, I'm 17 years old, and at 17 I knew everything. Like now all of a sudden I sit here at 30 years old and I think about it, and when I hear like folks talking about, well, I don't know if college is for me, I find myself almost being a hypocrite, like where I'm like, what do you mean college isn't for you? How could you possibly? And I even am a person who, when I was in college, didn't want to be there because I felt like the whole way through college was in the way of me making money.
Okay.
I did a presentation for one of my classes on why going to college is not necessary. In
But you were in college.
7 or 8 or whatever year it was. I don't even remember anymore. Yeah, right. But I'm in college at the same time. But being on this side of it, I can certainly see where the trade-offs are, what the positives to it are, like the maturation process that you wouldn't get anywhere else. And if nothing else, something I realized when I finally got there, where else are you going to get 4 years to figure out what it is you really want to do with your life with nobody breathing down your neck saying, you got to start contributing something. Otherwise, you got to go. Right. So there's a lot of positives to it beyond the educational piece that I now realize, exists. But at the time, I was like, I don't need that. Steve Jobs didn't graduate college, right? Like, not Steve Jobs. Bill Gates didn't graduate from college. Mark Zuckerberg, bad example now.
One of the interesting things that this particular conversation made me think about is what? Dang it, I forgot my thought.
You're having a real old man day.
I don't know
maybe
what's going on.
Maybe it's the sweater. You guys listening can't see Ben's sweater, but maybe it's the old man sweater is turning you into a geriatric.
And with my dementia setting in, I'm going to ask that we go to a quick music break. But before we do, I want to remind you can always catch past episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Of course, leave us a review on those, and that'll help us go up in the ratings and help more people find the show. You can also send your questions or comments or thoughts, things that you might want us to have us cover on the show. Send it to info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. And you can also follow us on social media. Malcolm, what's your Instagram handle?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
And, of course, mine is @MYDM1. This is Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money, where I've taken a ginkgo biloba pill to try and get my memory back. We are talking about, on today's conversation at hand, higher education alternatives, Malcolm, and I remembered the thought that I was having as it pertains to higher education alternatives.
Right.
What I do remember from childhood that's different now, like when I talk to people who are younger than me, even a few years, like 5 or 6 years younger, there's a consideration for how much college costs that wasn't really there when I was coming up.
I agree.
Just like when I was coming up in Pasadena, California, it was achieve degrees at all cost. Like there's no cost too high for these degrees that'll keep you warm. College Dropout reference, if you're not familiar.
I'm impressed.
Are you?
I'm impressed.
I did
that
good
was
there.
not an Usher album you just referenced. That was a legitimate rap album. I'm impressed.
Indeed. Thank you, sir. I'll take a bow after the show. But like now, for example, I was talking to somebody who I did a panel event with once, and she talked about how before she went to college, she picked her college based on what it would cost, and it was completely opposite to how I chose where I went to school.
I went to the school I wanted to go to.
Right. Period. And with her, she's younger than I am, and it was a question of, oh, I don't want to have this much debt afterward, so that's not an option. Oh, that place costs too much money, and she eventually went to like not her top school choice, but a choice that would have allowed her to leave school debt free. And I felt like because she was younger and maybe had a slightly different experience or exposure to the world just based
watching
on
us, listening to us, complaining.
Right. And she finished debt free and doesn't have any school debt as a result. So I think that's an interesting thing that even if people are still going to college, what college they pick is still a little bit maybe different.
So is that not the job of the high school guidance counselor to provide guidance? I never had those conversations with my guidance counselor when I was in high school. It was, to your point, you're going to X university.
Right.
That's a really great school, great name, sounds great. I'm proud of you. But nobody's and I don't mean financial guidance as in like sit down with me and draft a plan for here's how you're going to pay for it, but just provide some kind of guidance, because I didn't know how much college really cost, at the time. Fortunately, I didn't go to the most expensive school in North Carolina or in the United States, but still, like, I didn't really have that conversation either.
Right.
In hindsight, it would have been helpful. I don't know if it would have swayed me to go somewhere else, so I guess maybe I'm glad I didn't have the conversation.
That's a question, because I don't honestly think it would have changed my mind one bit.
It might have.
Maybe.
It might have. I might have actually considered a state school had I really considered the cost of,
That's true. Well, of course, on this show, we're talking about higher education alternatives. There are new and innovative career paths and options, but some are also finding trouble in the news. Following new and non-traditional paths may work for some, but there's always a risk in pursuing a skill set in new ways which have not yet stood the test of time. You'll understand in a moment what I mean by that. This is a headline actually now. WeWork expands its Flatiron School education business to London with £1 million in scholarships. This was a story by Ingrid Lunden on TechCrunch in March 2018. WeWork, the co-working startup valued at $20 billion with some 200,000 members across 200 locations globally, is continuing with the strategy of expanding into a wide array of adjacent operations to grow its business. Today, the company announced that it will be expanding the coding-focused Flatiron School abroad, starting in London in June. And we've actually talked about the Flatiron School before.
And I didn't know WeWork bought them since we initially discussed.
This was new information.
That was interesting.
Flatiron School's London operation will be based out of Finsbury Pavement, one of WeWork's multiple London locations, and it will kick off with 2 courses, one a full-time software engineering immersive course that will last 15 weeks, and the other a part-time front-end web developer course that will run 10 weeks. And of course, like I said, we've talked about Flatiron before and other coding camps or coding boot camps where they take you through like 10 or 15 or 16 weeks of training where you learn how to code and you walk out with, I suppose, like a certificate saying you finished, but essentially the skills you need to code. It's an interesting path. And one of the stories that we read many, many shows ago now was that the graduates were doing really, really well. Right.
But that was their claim to fame.
That was their claim to fame.
Put you in a job.
Absolutely. It was some crazy like 90% job placement rate, which
like
would make
60 days later, 90-something% of all their people were in a job.
Right. Which people would say, well, why would I go to college?
Yeah.
Right. But the question.
I said that.
Yeah, I think.
Why did I go to college?
Right. But stories of caution and innovative secondary education options are there. This is another headline which kind of underscores the reason why I have to be careful with new and innovative paths to a career. This headline read, Coding Boot Camps, 375,000 settlement highlights challenges for new industry. This was a MarketWatch.com piece in October 2017 by Jillian Berman. This was another story about the same school. The Flatiron School reached a deal with the Attorney General of New York over its job placement claims. Coding academies have been alternatively hailed as an innovative way to prepare workers for in-demand jobs and derided as the latest example of pitfalls of what can happen when you allow for-profit companies into the education space. A new deal between the New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman and the Flatiron School, a well-established New York City coding boot camp, highlights the challenges faced by the industry and by officials trying to regulate it. Flatiron paid $375,000 over claims the school operated without a license and improperly advertised its job placement and graduate rates, which is what we just mentioned, Malcolm. The settlement came as the coding boot camp industry is facing a reckoning. Multiple high-profile boot camps funded by companies or operating for-profit college chains have closed over the past several months, underscoring the difficulty of running a successful training program in a nascent industry. The schools typically charge thousands of dollars for several-month courses that provide in-demand skills but no actual degree, which is kind of like a quagmire. You go get the skills that you think will get you the job, but then you don't necessarily have anything that's backed up in terms of name or...
That sounds eerily like Trump University. Like,
you stay bringing that up.
Back here in the same... Anyway, sorry.
You always bringing that up.
You were on to something.
I was on to something. The detailed report on the students who graduated from the school's in-person program between August 2015 and the end of 2016 notes that of the 301 students who accepted a job, 52% took a full-time salary role, so not nearly as many as we were saying earlier. Roughly 45% took a full-time contract, internship, or apprentice job, which is not necessarily the same thing. I think when we originally covered this particular school, it was some crazy number like 90% getting salaries of like $80,000 a year. It just seemed like guaranteed.
Right.
And when schools advertise percentages that high, this is a quote from the story, it's likely that there's a lot of manipulation. Sometimes it may just be that a school is particularly selective. So the students who make it in are likely to succeed because they're the top candidates. But in other cases, it's because the schools are counting so many different types of people as placed or working in their desired field that the designation carries little meaning. So it's like even if somebody got a job as like the maintenance man at the tech place, they're still counting that as placement and through their job and skills program.
Or if you turn around and teach part-time.
Right. Then that's counting as well.
Yeah.
So interesting question. Like it's one of those things where we kind of have to be careful of these new and innovative pathways to careers at the same time that we are interested in them,
right? Because
we don't necessarily know the full of how they're going to evolve or how the career path evolves.
Well, not only that, I guess there's no guarantees regardless on your return on investment, right?
That's
if
true.
you go to a 4-year college, if you go to University of Maryland, for example, and you major in computer science, right, there's no guarantee that you're going to come out of school and do any better than somebody that goes to Flatiron for 9 months or whatever and gets their coding certificate.
Right.
So I think, to your point, there is something to be concerned with them pretending or, fluffing up their numbers a little bit to entice you to come there versus going the traditional path. Mm-hmm. I do think that, needs to be litigated and needs to be regulated. Right. But at the same time, nobody can really guarantee you that after you've come there and spent the time, you're gonna still walk away with like that coveted, right, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 coding job right out of school.
Right.
It's kind of up to you and your network as far as where you can actually apply it.
That's true. And another interesting story. The headline read: "Crackdown on for-profit colleges may free students and trap taxpayers." This was a New York Times story from August 2016 by Patricia Cohen. It read, "The Obama administration's decision to bar ITT educational services." We used to have those commercials growing up, ITT Tech.
They're still out there.
Yeah. One of the nation's largest operators of for-profit colleges from using federal financial aid to enroll new students. It shut off a cash spigot to the troubled company. The decision was the latest step in the federal government's crackdown on for-profit schools that have vacuumed up billions of dollars in government grants and loans but failed to deliver on promising training and jobs. ITT Tech, or ITT, with about 4,500,000 enrolled students spread over more than 130 campuses across the country, received an estimated $580 million in federal money in 2015, according to the Department of Education. So this for-profit business was taking, government money or government loans typically assigned for traditional nonprofit universities,
Right.
And giving people the opportunity to go to school. But in this, at least in this story, the rest of it was that some of these students were left who didn't finish, were left with a whole lot of debt they probably wouldn't be able to pay.
I think that's kind of the case if you go to school, if you go to college and don't graduate anyway.
That's
I think
true.
that's one of the conundrums of deciding to go to college and then deciding not to finish.
Right.
Is you are saddled with the debt if you do have to take out student loans for it, for a degree that was supposed to get you the job that would afford you the ability to pay the loans back and then have a better life.
Right.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like it's two knocks against you, that you now have the debt of somebody who has the higher education and you don't have the income of somebody who has the higher education.
Right. That's true. So a question for you, Malcolm. We're in this place like where technology is becoming more central to what we do on a day-to-day basis. And also a moment when that technology allows us to feel like we love immediate gratification, where a 16-week boot camp might feel like the path to go down. How are those things going to square as we continue to move forward? Wow, how we used to educate people still seems to feel like a long time in comparison.
Well, I'm not ready to give up on it, because you know me and you know that I am one of the hardest critics of the American educational system. Like the way it just teaches you to, move a widget from point A to point B and then show up every other week and collect your check. It doesn't really teach you anything. That's really my biggest beef with it. So I'm happy to see folks thinking outside of the box and trying to figure out ways to combat the old guard, if you will. But I do think there has to be some guardrails put on it to make sure that you're not promising people something you're not actually delivering on. I think the best iteration of this that I've seen, and this tells you just how far we've gotten, how low we've gotten in the unemployment scales that companies are willing to do this. I've heard of and seen major tech companies, your Microsofts and Google and folks like that are actually paying for these camps themselves. So they are taking you out of college. You graduate from college and from high school in some instances. They put you in the Flatiron School, for example, not Flatiron, but something like it, for the 12 months or whatever it takes. And then they immediately hire you as a graduate from that program to work for their company.
I see.
So now they have their own pipeline of folks who they know are going to be qualified to do the jobs that they can't fill otherwise, because nobody's available to do it, that they've spent the money to bring in the talent to do it. That actually, to me, is probably the best way to go about it. Because even if you work there for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever your tour of duty, so to speak, happens to be, you now get a skill set and a notch on your resume that you wouldn't have been able to get anywhere else. So I think that's probably the best way that I've seen this whole thing be adapted.
Right. And another question that's kind of connected to that, as technology continues to progress, are we in danger of like secondary education systems not keeping pace with what's going on in the real world?
You mean as far as like what they're teaching?
What they're teaching, and also just the way that it goes.
So I think a significant problem is having a college degree today, a bachelor's degree, is about the equivalent of what having a high school diploma was in like the 70s. So you also have to consider like you really need that advanced skill set in order to get the job that you really want, that coveted position. So now you're skipping undergrad, which is the equivalent of the high school diploma 50 years ago, 40 years ago, and you're also not going to grad school. You're circumventing all of that and hoping to God that advanced skill set, that specialized skill set that you're going to get is going to be the thing to sustain, what lifestyle you've now built on top of having this job. So I hope it's not a house of cards that comes, tumbling down when folks realize, there's not a lot of pieces built into it. But, again, unfortunately, it's one of those things that we have to let time tick and let it prove out.
And then maybe at that point we'll come around to the universal income.
Heck no.
Universal basic income.
Americans are still way too greedy for UBI to ever be a real thing.
Indeed. Well, this has been another episode of Manage Your Damn Money. We want to thank you for listening and for watching, and also thank our partners here at Montgomery Community Media for another great show, the crew as well. If you want to listen to past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and now Spotify. Please do us a favor. Leave us a review on any of those platforms. Like our shows. Do whatever you can do to put some activity under there, because that helps us go up in the ratings. If you have a question that you want Malcolm to respond to, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram. Malcolm, what's your handle?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, mine is at MYDM1, and that's on Twitter as well. And you can also catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. We appreciate you listening and watching. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.